Why do some people have cursed energy traits in JJK? It seems to be like a Rorschach test. If somebody is so focused on one idea, all of their cursed energy takes on the same property. So instead of being general negative energy, all the energy they produce has one precise effect. Hakari and Kashimo both have this kind of power, where even without their cursed techniques, they still have special properties of their cursed energy that they can use in combat. Hakari is obsessed with fighting. It gets to the point that he tunes out other conversations just to care about this one passion of his. And his cursed energy has the property of a serrated bat, where it's spiky and can pierce through other cursed energy to hurt a person even if they can block it physically. And Kashimo is obsessed with chasing an impossible high, so he can split his cursed energy into positive and negative charges, building up power across them to release it for a bunch of damage on anything in between those charges. Lots of characters can be single-minded in different ways, and have serious convictions for serious goals. But for Hakari and Kashimo, it's almost instinct to care about what they do, and then they tune out everything else so they can't even follow a typical conversation when the details aren't specifically about what they're after. And it makes sense for the power system too. While raw cursed energy is just the idea of negative and destructive power, anyone who wields it subconsciously attaches it to other concepts, which shifts the properties of that cursed energy because it can be used on itself, like negatives turning a negative into a positive, at least a very slight amount. People's subconscious feelings and associations direct where cursed energy goes and what it latches onto, which affects what it does and how a chain reacts into more cursed energy showing up somewhere. When there's enough cursed energy about the same concept in the same area, because it was all sent there, it can cluster successfully into a distinct concept for a cursed spirit, instead of just dissipating over time. And sorcerers who wield cursed energy on purpose run it through a technique, which is just a set of shapes it goes through to hammer in one specific effect and hook it up to rules to make it more complicated. But the raw cursed energy that they wield can subconsciously be applied to different targets or have some complicated effect anyway, like turning somebody into a curse, which is what happened to Rika. Nanami subconsciously applies cursed energy to protect his soul against Mahito. So if subconsciously you're only thinking in one specific way, there is only one structure that you are thinking through, and it is constant, all the cursed energy you'd produce would be in a precise enough way to have a noticeable property that sets it apart from general regular raw cursed energy. If your train of thought is only strictly following one idea in your head at all times, then even without running your cursed energy through a specific circuit, it's gonna have one distinct noticeable trait. Any application of cursed energy is hooking it up to wider conceptual flows of cursed energy and drawing from cursed energy's ability to be used conceptually. Anyone can make binding vows, not just with themselves, but in a way that binds other people through some kind of force of karma, because that's always what their application of cursed energy is interconnected with. They can make their effects more effective, they can make their techniques even stronger if they turn it into some kind of elaborate conceptual ritual. And if they apply cursed energy through a physical impact to amplify it, at the exact moment of impact, it creates a noticeable and conceptual space distortion effect in the form of black flash lightning. Cursed energy is always hooked up to the bigger picture. It's sort of holistic in a way. And being completely removed from the bigger picture because you're single-mindedly caring about one specific idea at all times lets you take advantage of that even better than most people, because it will give you an ability that will still work even if your cursed techniques are burnt out from using your domain. Sukuna is very extreme and applies force so that he can follow one specific worldview and satisfy his own desires at any given point in time. And even if that was what he was cursed to eventually want to do, that is still a deliberate choice he consciously makes day by day. And Todo never properly pays attention to objective reality because he knows that humans with finite comprehension can never perceive the world through objective reality, so he balances how much he interprets reality rationally and how much he sees it in his own most comfortable way based on what's optimal for a person with his talents and what makes him the most effective externally as a sorcerer. The best sorcerers are always a little crazy, but this doesn't come from Todo only being able to think of one idea. He's able to think through a lot of different subjects. It's just that his worldview isn't always grounded. Hakari and Kashimo are the only examples of people who are, on all levels, single-mindedly driven, and stand out for ignoring details that aren't specifically about what they're interested in when having important conversations in the story. It's like they have animalistic drives rather than deliberate convictions, and these determine all of their behavior. Kashimo's technique is Mythical Beast Amber, the power to slowly rearrange his body into the flesh of an asymptotically impossible concept of a mythical beast that's built from conceptual applications of power. It's built from concepts rather than a grounded physical way to be able to survive in the real world. So as his body is slowly transforming, he gains more organs and ways to apply cursed energy based on the traits it has conceptually, but then his body loses its functionality as a mortal flesh and blood body, which he'd need to survive, so he dies on the spot. And we don't see what he looks like dead. It might actually have him vanish into oblivion, because at that point he's just turned into ideas and circuits for harnessing ideas. Like, imagine making a computer with such small and dense circuits that can run super quickly while being super lightweight, meaning you could fit a lot of power into something small and light that you can take with you. Now imagine making those circuits so infinitely lightweight and small that they're no longer actual circuits anymore because they don't physically exist. That's at least what the idea behind Mythical Beast Amber seems to be, because it's symbolic of how Kashimo's driven mentally to reach and satisfy and experience an unachievable high. He wants to feel the thrill and satisfaction from using all his power, but that would require fighting a stronger threat and needing to expend all of his power, which would be a scenario he would not win, because that kind of threat would have to be able to kill him, and would do so as it makes him exhaust all the power he has. So he fights more and more extreme opponents, because he's constantly trying to reach that high, but it's asymptotic, because that kind of concept would require him to die before ever feeling the satisfaction from it. That's his figurative curse, which is important in the story, because it shows how people can be driven to do counterintuitive things and fall into these cycles for their whole lives when they're the ones with power and can get away with not having to question themselves. In the past, the strong would fight to both survive and enjoy it, but this meant that they'd be running themselves into the ground and slowly losing sight of the bigger point of anything, fighting just for the sake or fun of it, while trapping the rest of the world, the weaklings, beneath them and permanently scarring them, furthering a cycle of curses, which would be a way to contrast Sukuna, so Kashimo fights him and loses. But power system-wise, it would be that Kashimo's curse technique makes him single-mindedly driven to use that curse technique and amplify his traits until he stops existing. And that single-mindedness would give him a cursed energy trait based on building charges through electricity that you then release and satisfy. Hakari, on the other hand, is about optimization, but instead of optimizing his sanity like Toto, it's about how optimizing your effectiveness is always going to be about gambling. People who follow the rules and refuse to cut corners are gambling on that provided path, still working the way it's advertised, which could always be a scam or not sustainable for everyone, or might depend on conditions you'd need enough situational awareness to know are being satisfied for your case in the given moment. Life, competence, and stability are about optimizing probability and snowballing that through a probability loop, where something has more of a chance of happening than not, and you use that as a source of power to make even more things more likely to happen than not, even though you can never really guarantee that they will or won't happen, because you can't tell the future for sure. That's why Hakari's first big fight is against someone who tries seeing the future for sure, but ends up falling short, because that's not optimal for a person to try to do. You miss out on the bigger picture and can't predict every detail, and the people who are likely to rely on this are taking an overall shortcut that actually undermines their potential growth or strength overall. So Hakari gets a technique based on gambling, and he's single-mindedly driven to snowball, gaining probability advantages, or in other words, ownership and stability and power and control over and through everything else. And his domain is factored into that because that's how he sees the world, something he can rise to the top of by growing a sports betting industry, turning other people into gamblers in a way that makes his ability to use them less of a gamble because it gets more and more likely to succeed. Hakari's curse technique comes with the domain expansion, because a domain expansion works by spreading your figurative curse to the world around you. That's why the strongest curse users, who are already powerful enough to spread their curses to the rest of the world without relying on barrier mechanics or specifically manifesting their domain, seem to be able to expand their domains without having to close a barrier around them. But if your curse technique and your overall figurative curse are based on you spreading your curse to others by default, then your curse technique naturally comes with your domain expansion. Pachinko relies on gambling to achieve a jackpot, but you need the skill to aim marbles through doors, to trigger the gambling for cheaper, and to take home more money that you get from it. So skilled pachinko players can potentially even the odds, or even statistically be likely to take home more money than they'd spend playing the game. So Hakari's basic moveset would be the skills that give someone an advantage in a gamble, but he's wired to use this to fight other people and win against them in a gamble, while he uses the victory to snowball more power, effectively trapping people under him. This is his worldview, that everything, even a fight, is gambling, and that you're supposed to snowball probabilities to increase them and make them less risks to take. So by default, his curse technique comes with a domain expansion, because the way he's wired is innately to spread his curse to others and trap them in it, similar to how Higuruma's innately wired to take advantage of the law by holding other people accountable to it and dragging them into that kind of judgment. So he naturally gets a domain, and by that I mean domain expansion, because his innate domain is tied to how the world should be run through law and order, but a fair version of that. And then he also gets a base moveset, reflecting how he has an advantage with the law, just like how Hakari's technique works. The difference with Hakari, though, is that his innate domain worldview, plus the curse technique tendency, trap his mindset in a feedback loop of fighting. That one single-minded and animalistic idea that everything is a competition to brutishly beat down other people, and to live in that and find it fun without actually losing your way in the process or running yourself into the ground, which is why his second opponent is Kashimo, who he kind of beats after beating that Future Sight guy. And because he's single-mindedly driven by that combination of his innate domain and curse technique that takes into account what his innate domain is from the start, he gets the violent, spiky cursed energy trait that hurts a lot, even if you can block it with other cursed energy, mentally overwhelming people and dragging them into fights and then beating them down to force them to follow the system and compulsions he benefits from, like making your own cycle of curses to thrive beyond one. I think the biggest takeaway, though, is that gambling and cutting corners are awesome. Also, that sports betting is a bad idea. So, don't do that, I guess. See ya.